This is the Seiko SNE586, a solar quartz dive watch that I think represents amazing value. Now, this was released a couple of years ago in 2022 in a number of different colorways. But the one that I thought was the most interesting one was this one. This rose gold and black colorway that I think is very elegant. Now, I bought this 2.5 years ago, and this was my daily for about a year. So this is a bit of a long-term review. Now, this is the first Seiko on the channel, and I think Seiko is a very important brand. I mean, they did invent the quartz movement, so I think they deserve a lot of respect. And so I think it's fitting for my first Seiko to be a quartz watch. It's also nice that it's my first Seiko on the channel is a dive watch. I'm a bit of a fan of dive watches, a bit obsessed, I would say even, because I think the timing bezel is one of the most useful complications in horology, really. But Seiko is also known for its iconic line of divers, and we'll get into that as well. Now, Seiko is able to offer watches like this for rather affordable prices. These went for about 500 or so euros when they came out, and they've held their value surprisingly well, especially this colorway. This colorway is quite rare in Europe. But Seiko is able to do this because they're vertically integrated. They do pretty much everything in-house, and they even grow their own quartz crystals that they use in their movements. So I think that this tool watch represents something that is the culmination of Seiko's own history. As you know, in the channel, I like to go into a bit of history. So Seiko is very interesting because they do everything from cheap watches, really affordable watches, to really expensive watches in the Grand Seiko line. And there's also Grand Seiko divers. Now, they're perhaps most known for what they did in 1969, which is to release a watch called the Seiko Astron. That watch is iconic because it was the first quartz watch ever in the world. And what that did was it caused what's often known in the industry as the quartz crisis. Before Seiko invented the quartz watch, the watchmaking industry was dominated by Swiss brands making mechanical watches. But in the 1970s and even in the 80s, the Swiss watchmaking industry was absolutely on its heels. And this is because Seiko introduced the quartz watches that were a lot more affordable, because quartz, the movement is a lot simpler, and also a lot more accurate than mechanical watches. So the Swiss watch industry had to do some soul searching, right? And a lot of brands went under. The Swiss watch industry was able to respond, on the one hand, with what eventually became the Swatch Group, including their sort of flagship product, which was the Swatch watch, which were also quartz watches. And of course, they were also able to reposition themselves as luxury watches. So no longer about accuracy, although of course we're still obsessed with accuracy with METAS or COSC certifications, but also what we focus on really are things like finishing. They've become more jewelry than anything else. So that was in 1969. But before that, Seiko also released their first true diver, the 62 Mass. And that was really an exceptional watch with a depth rating of 150 meters, which was significant for the time. And that one was developed for the Japanese Antarctic Research Expedition. Although I don't actually think it was used for that one, but that was the history. So Seiko has a lot of credibility in the dive space. And this one is part of the Prospex line. So these represent professional grade watches, so tools, at accessible prices. And of course, we know that this is a Prospex watch because it says, if you look at it at the 6 o'clock, Divers 200s, which is a text you can put on a watch if you meet the ISO 6425 certification for it actually being a diver's watch. And this has a depth rating of 200 meters. Now, like I said, this is a stainless steel case with rose gold DLC coating. And DLC is diamond-like carbon, and it is very strong. It's very hard. So not only does it change the look of the stainless steel, but also gives it some durability and scratch resistance. And of course, this watch I've owned for, like I said, 2.5 years. Used it extensively for at least a year and a half. Took it cycling, took it to the gym. It's been in water, it's been halfway across the world, and you don't really see any scratches. I mean, on the case back, yes, of course, that's just stainless steel, but on the actual case, very few scratches. So I find that to be absolutely amazing. And the case is actually mostly brushed, as you can tell, but there's some lovely polishing on the edges. It's very, very well done. It's a very, very high level of finishing for a watch at this price, I think. So that mix of brushed and polishing really gives it that tool watch look, but with a hint of elegance that I think is quite nice. And of course, this has the screw down case back and the screw down crown, which gives it that 200 meters of water resistance. And like I said, it is ISO 6425 certified. What I really also like about this watch are the dimensions. Now, this is quite a small watch. So the actual diameter is 38.5 millimeters, and I'd say it wears more like a 38 millimeter watch. And I find that size to be very, very comfortable and very sort of sports appropriate. It fits most wrists, and it just doesn't take up that much space. And it's also very, very thin. It's 10.6 millimeters thin, which I think is very, very nice. And the lug to lug is 46.5 millimeters, which again, I think is quite ideal. And compared to mechanical divers, this is significantly light at around 150 grams. The other thing that this one has are drill lugs. Now, you don't get drill lugs in many watches at much higher price points, but you do get them with these. So it makes it very easy with a tool like this, strap change tool, to actually get in there and change the strap, should you desire. So I think that the dimensions are very, very nice. And I'll put this on my wrist to show you. Today I have my Casio MRG, which of course I recently did an unboxing of and a comparison with another watch. But if I take that off, I've got to unlock it. If I take that off and put this on, you can see that on my essentially 17 centimeter wrist, or I think that's 6.7 inches, it fits in very, very well. I think it looks really nice, doesn't take too much space, and hugs the wrist very, very well. So it's a very comfortable watch. And it comes with a rubber strap. I don't know what kind of rubber this is, but it's very soft and very comfortable. And of course it comes with a matching rose gold, matching rose gold clasp with the Seiko logo on there. So very nice altogether. For a dive watch, I mentioned earlier that I think the timing bezel is one of the most useful complications. And in this one, I have to say it's got a really, really good diving bezel. Before we get to anything else, let's hear how it sounds. So it's quite satisfying, really. So Seiko really does have its own feel when it comes to diving bezels. Now, what I really like about this diving bezel is that it's aluminium, but it looks very different. It doesn't look like your standard aluminium bezel. And that's because it's got this ribbed texture to it. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's got this ribbed texture to it, which gives it a lot of visual interest, and it makes it very, very strong. So even though it is aluminium, you're not gonna have this scratch anytime soon. What I also like about the bezel is that it's got very, very legible numbers. So the typography is very good. I think it's better than the classic one on the Rolex. I know the Rolex bezel is iconic, but I was never a big fan of the typography. Here, it's a lot better. And you have hash marks all around, right? So normally in dive watches, sometimes they go to 10, sometimes you have these minute markings up to 15. Here you have it all over. So if you really want to be very precise about your timing, you can do that. It's got a 120 click action and very pleasant, like I said. So the bezel is a definite plus point on this watch. So the dial is pretty basic, but in a very nice way. So it's got this matte black or gray dial. And what they've done, I think that's quite smart, is that the minute markings are on the reo or the rehearts. And why I like that is because it keeps the dial very clean. It's very easy to read the time with this. And of course, the matte black reduces glare, so it's also very, very legible for that reason. I also really like the rather distinct Seiko hand shapes. You'll not confuse the hour hand for the minute. And it's got a reverse lollipop seconds hand. So the slight downside is that the lollipop is on the other end. So that's where the Lume is. So when you're reading the time at night, you're actually seeing the wrong side of the seconds hand. But I don't think it's that big a problem really. The other really cool thing is you have a date matched window, which is not always the case. That's one of the reasons I got it. So it's got like a color matched date wheel and a Lume sort of area on the 3 o'clock as well. Because in some watches, that 3 o'clock is replaced by the date window and you don't have a Lume plot there, but you do in this one. And of course, it has sapphire crystal for this price. But speaking of Lume, I have to say, Casio's Lumibrite is the best I've seen. So I've got this, a Satina and a Longines dive watch. I've had Midos and I've also had Squales. And this one has the best Lume of all of them. It shines bright green and really, I think it's the best in class at this price point, and in fact at much higher price points as well. The movement on this watch is a V147. So the V147 is a solar movement, but it doesn't need the sun to charge. It charges from any light source. So you can even charge it in artificial light. So really the benefit of that is that you don't really have to change the battery or the capacitor that often. So I'd say maybe once every 10 or 15 years. And that's a huge convenience. And the accuracy, because it is quartz, is about plus minus 15 seconds a month. Those are Seiko's tolerances, but in my experience, it's a lot less than that. So it is exceptional. It's not a high accuracy quartz. You'd have to pay a lot more for those. But I find the 15 seconds a month is perfectly respectable. And really, it just means that you need to fix the watch once a month, which you might want to do anyway because of the date. It does also feature hacking. So this means that if I pull the crown out and if I pull it to the second position, the seconds hand stops. So it makes it very easy to set the time. And it has overcharge protection. So you're not gonna overcharge the capacitor. Now let's go to the pros and cons. The pros are the DLT coating is excellent. Even after a lot of use, very few scratches. And also the rose gold is so beautiful. You have to see it in person with the brushed on this side, the polished on the coin edge bezel, and also the polishing on the edges, like I said. The Lume is absolutely amazing. The design is quite distinctive. It does not feel derivative, which is always difficult for a dive watch. The solar means it's set and forget, so you really only have to set it once a month. It's got sapphire crystal, which I think is very nice. It's ISO 6425 certified, so it's a real dive watch. It's a tool watch. It's got drilled lugs, and of course, this particular colorway is quite rare in Europe. So a lot of pros for this watch. Now, one of the cons could be bezel alignment issues on some units, but that is not the case in this one. So I don't really know if that can be a con because this one is perfectly aligned. I think the rubber band is extremely comfortable, but it does sometimes attract dust and cat hair if you've got a cat. And the finishing is not sort of amazing, but I think for the price, it's perfectly acceptable. And the hands are not as well finished as on some of the more expensive Swiss watches. I think this watch is for anyone who wants a no-fuss dive watch that's elegant, but still a sporty tool watch. And one that's light, so you can really take it anywhere you want. And I think the dive bezel is very useful every day for timing your posture, timing your walks, even using as a countdown timer. Essentially, you can use the bezel as like a bookmark in time, right? It's a temporal bookmark. So I really like that. And there are a couple of variations of this. Seiko has also released a new version of this with even more distinctive typography on the actual bezel, which is also very nice, but that also comes with the price increase. If I were you, I would look for this one or any of the other colorways that Seiko released along with this. I think they're just absolutely fantastic watches. And if you just need a reliable dive watch that looks good, you can't go wrong with these. Thanks for watching and talk to you later.